I'm from a poor family in the Midwest, and there's something to be said for knowing there is no plan B.
Hey everybody, it's me back in sunny California after a couple of weeks away. If you tuned in last episode, I believe it was when my introduction was from a boat in Croatia, on the coast of Croatia, which was an incredible little vacation with some dear friends. We spoiled ourselves rotten. It was really, really amazing. And I just got back from New York City. I went from our vacation in Croatia to New York and had the honor and pleasure over the weekend of sitting in with the great Hugh Jackman at his Radio City Music Hall residency. He's doing a bunch of shows this year at Radio City, and he asked me to come and be his special guest for a few shows. So we did 2 evening shows and 1 matinee, which is actually a funny story because when he said, would you do 3 shows? And I said, yeah, sure, 3 nights. And he said, well, no, it's 2 nights and 1 matinee. And I said, what the fuck is a matinee? Of course, I know what a matinee is, but those of us in rock and roll don't play matinees. That's a Broadway thing. But we did these 3 shows over the weekend, and it was just such a blast. We did a new song it's on my new album that's coming out the very beginning of the year. The album, I think I've mentioned it. If I haven't, the album is called After Hours, and it's an album that is very different than anything I've ever done before. It's half standards that I've always loved from the Great American Songbook, and half songs I wrote that I think sound kind of like that era. And I just wrote this last song for the album just a few weeks ago called Big Band Boogie, and I played it for Hugh because we've been friends for 22 years. He reminded me our friendship goes back 22 years. And he heard the song and he went, Ricardo, he calls me Ricardo, we've got to do that song at Radio City. So we did this song that nobody had ever heard before. We debuted the Big Band Boogie. Hugh and I did it together with his whole band and orchestra. And it was just such a blast. And then we did Right Here Waiting, which was really fun. There's a bunch of clips on social media and on YouTube if you want to check it out. Hugh Jackman is he's a dear friend. He's incredibly talented. He's so talented that sometimes it's annoying. And just, his reputation of being such a nice guy is well earned. He really is one of the more decent human beings I've ever had the pleasure to know. I absolutely love him. And we don't get to see each other that much, so this was a great excuse to hang a little bit. But when we perform together, there's something magical and special, I think. And audiences were great. It was just such a great weekend in New York City, and the weather was beautiful. And Daisy and I went to some great restaurants, and it was just lovely. I feel excited, and I feel like I just came back from a second vacation, and I'm happy to be home. And I'm happy to be presenting you this week's episode of Stories to Tell. I'm really excited about this episode because my guest is Shelley Wright, who is such an incredible artist, such an incredible songwriter, such a great singer, and has had an incredible career as a country singer since about 1999, late 90s. She had a big #1 song back then called Single White Female. That's what got my attention. And then I was going to Nashville quite a bit back in those days to write with various country artists and songwriters. And there was a record executive in Nashville who reached out to me and said, I think you would really love this girl, Shelley Wright. So I listened to her album that was out, and I loved it. There were only a couple of songs on the album that Shelley wrote herself. So that was always if I was going to write with her, I kind of wanted to see if I could get a read on what her songwriting talent was and what it was like. And the song that closed that album was a song called Picket Fences, which Shelley wrote by herself. And it's the diamond on the album. It's one of my favorite songs. It's just such an incredible song. And I was I was immediately impressed by her songwriting. And so we got together one day and we wrote a song that was okay. It was kind of a ditty. But then we wrote a duet together called The Edge of Forever, which I ultimately recorded with her on an album of mine called Days in Avalon. And we just became such great friends, and we've been friends since then, since 25 years now. And we're in touch with each other pretty regularly. She's one of the brightest people I've ever met. She's one of the most sarcastic, sardonic, hilarious people I've ever known. Her mind is just so, I love sitting with people where if there's a topic or there's a comment made, it's almost like a race to the punchline. It's a race to the sarcastic quip or comeback. And I have to be on my toes with Shelley Wright. And she's become a very important activist for the LGBTQ community, for diversity, and she's reinvented herself in a lot of different ways. And she's a great mom and just one of my favorite people. And she happened to be in LA, and we sat and had this conversation, which was really, really special to me. As I say to her all the time, any time I spend with you is time well spent. So sit back and pour yourself something, and please enjoy this episode of Stories to Tell with my dear friend, Shelley Wright.
And cheers to one of my absolute favorite humans in all of the history of humandom.
Likewise. I cannot believe I'm in this chair. I'm freaking out.
These are the steps I have to take to hang out with you.
Hardly.
Hey, Shelley,
Hardly.
want to have dinner? Oh, I can't. I'm in Atlanta. Hey, want to be on my show? And you're like, okay, I'll come do your show. Because you saw the Kenny G episode, and you were like, okay, I'm coming to LA and doing the show.
It turned me.
It did.
That episode.
Turned you how exactly?
I'm still gay.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't turn me in that way.
Wow, we're going to go with that. Talk about a headline off the top.
It was your podcast is killing me, and trying to figure out like what is the recipe of the podcast. And I realized a month or so ago it's the authenticity of the relationships. There's no magic formula. It's you having conversations with people you love and people who love you, and that you can't recreate that. So I'm a fangirl, but that episode I was on the edge of my seat.
And you fell in love with Kenny G?
Again, yes, still gay, but I've got a little bit of crush on him. And can you facilitate?
Yes,
yeah.
That's an epic dinner and hang that needs to happen. I feel like I really want to start with a little, I guess it would be context for the listeners or viewers. 1999, I'm in Nashville a lot. Yeah. And it's become a really wonderful place for my creativity to thrive. I'm a few years away from having my last hit as an artist, and I'm really kind of like headfirst into writing and producing for other people. And even though I kept doing pop and rock stuff, I was welcomed to a great degree, as much as any pop guy was allowed to be at that time. Into Nashville, into the artistic community, particularly the songwriting community. And through that, I met some people, executives and record people and stuff, and I get a call one day from a guy at MCA Records in Nashville who says, hey, would you be interested in writing with Shelley Wright? And I immediately knew your name from your massive #1 song, Single White Female, which I really liked a lot. And maybe it was just about to go into the second single, It Was, which I arguably loved even more as a song and as a performance. But, and I remember I was a little, I didn't want to just do whatever just because somebody had a hit. So I said, well, you know, I need to do a little deeper dive. So he said, I'll messenger you. I was at a hotel.
Was that Shane Barrett?
Shane Barrett.
Okay.
Shane Barrett.
Yeah.
He said, I'll messenger you over her CD. So I drove around Nashville for a day or two listening to your album. This is all stuff you know already, but it's fun to reminisce this way. And there was Singer White Female. I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. I hear it on the radio all the time. It's really good. Then I heard It Was, and I was like, oh God, there's something about the way she's phrasing this. And it's such a good song by Gary Burr. Mm-hmm. And then there was and you had maybe 2 Wrights on that album, or maybe 3.
I don't know. We'd have to go back and look.
Yeah,
but
it was
I definitely
a lot of
write
covers,
yeah.
a lot of songs you covered by other writers.
Yeah, a lot of new originals that I didn't write.
Right.
And a few that I think a few that I did.
Yeah, I think there were a few.
Yeah.
But, so I was sort of, and I'm a credits junkie, but I was driving around, so I didn't know who had written what. And then we get to the last song called Picket Fences. And I remember I had to listen to it a couple of times, and I couldn't wait to get back to my hotel to see who wrote that song. And it was your sole write on the album. It was the song you wrote by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I remember I called Shane Barrett and I said, I would love to write with Shelley Wright. And he set it up.
Yeah.
So we have him to thank for this.
We do. And I recall the first time, I don't know if we talked on the phone or got together, but I recall you were telling me that you had explored the record beyond the hit and the new release that was coming out, which now, after having known you for 26 years, it's totally in keeping with who you are as a creative person. You've never chased the new it thing. And I remember when you told me, I dug into the record. I didn't know who'd written what, but the song that really grabbed me is a song that you wrote. And as a writer, and especially as a woman who writes songs, for someone as esteemed as you and accomplished as you, to recognize my acumen as a songwriter. And, you know, I'm pretty picky about who I write with too. And I have a hard time writing with people who haven't written a bunch of songs by themselves.
Yeah. Because you don't know really what you're getting. If somebody writes a bunch of great songs, but they're all co-writes, or they're all 3-way writes, or whatever. Yeah. You don't really, sometimes they are the through line.
Yep.
That's happened.
Yep.
But let's face it.
Sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it's not, and you don't know what you're getting in a room with.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
And I was just really flattered and excited, and that song in particular I'd written a long time ago. At that time, a few years prior. Mm-hmm. And the way that it ended up on the record was really unique and really kind of, when I think about that record, that song almost not being on that record, there's a really good chance Richard Marx would not have become my friend.
Wow, that's heavy.
It's heavy.
Tell me the story of how it almost didn't come on the.
Yeah, so we were. That was a record that Nora Wilson, Buddy Cannon, and Tony Brown produced. Tony was the head of the record label at the time. I'd had a record out on MCA before, which kind of had my first kind of quasi hit in Shut Up and Drive, and then Single White Female was the one. It had to happen, right? And you know, back in the day, I'd gone from Polygram with 2 failed albums, and this was my shot at MCA to really, it had to happen, yep. or I'd be, you know, a footnote in the history of Music Row. And we were making the second record. We were at Sound Emporium on Music Row. I see you smiling. Mm-hmm. I know you've got a ton of memories from there, and I do as well. And we were on a lunch break, and everybody, I don't know where they went, maybe Jamaica's or South Street, I'm not sure where they went, but I stayed behind and was just kind of, had a guitar and was kind of playing in the big room. And I guess one of the mics was on. And Tony and Buddy had slipped back in after lunch, and I was noodling around on this song that I kind of thought was finished, maybe it wasn't. And I played through it, and then I heard a noise, like in the cans that were on the floor, the headphones that were on the floor. And I could hear Buddy saying, "What was that? What was that?" And I said, "Pardon?" He said, "What was that?" And I said, "Oh, it's just something." And he was like, play it again. And they walked into the big room and said, "Well, we're cutting that like today." So.
Wow. That song is just, to me, I've said it to you many times before, but I've told other people when I've talked about you, I think there are only a handful of songs that you could match to an artist or songwriter that is almost their quintessential song. Mm. In that the honesty and the vulnerability in that song, the courage that was in that song, for you to be this young, gorgeous, hot female country singer saying, "I don't need to fit into your slot.
Yeah.
Maybe Picket Fence. Maybe I'm not supposed to be." What's so great about the sweetness of like there is it might be really nice, but maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I need to the amount of not just information, but imagination based upon the information that's in that 3.5 minutes or whatever it is was so impressive to me. And I remember thinking, why isn't she writing the entire album? And I had all these thoughts about like, well, I need to try to create something with the person who created this.
Aww.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
it was so impressive. And then we've worked together quite a bit, and we haven't written together as much as I wish we had, but when we have locked in, it's magical.
The easiest thing in the world. And just one more thing about Picket Fences. Thank you for all of that. I mean, I cherish that. That affirmation that you gave me about the vulnerability and the courage of the lyric, and most especially the courage with what I did with my voice. It was I felt very vulnerable using my head voice.
Yeah.
And your affirmation is what led to another song that I don't know that you even know I did it again with that affirmation of yours in mind. And it's a song called "Wish Me Away."
Oh, yeah.
And I remember the night I wrote it.
Yeah.
I was in a bad place. You did not know I was in a bad place, but you were still my very good friend. And I sent you a work tape of the song.
I have all those work tapes.
Oh, wow. That's crazy and
Hamburg.
Scary. Oh, my God. Anyway, so I played you that work tape, and I used the same kind of vulnerable, for me at least, my head voice is not a place I'm really comfortable in. And I sent you the work tape of "Wish Me Away," and you called me back and you said, "Go record that right now." And I remember the Grammys were on, and it was like 20 degrees in the bottom floor of my house where my little studio was. And I said, "Oh, I'll do it in the morning." And you said, "Go down there right now and do it."
Did I?
And I did. And that work tape, what kind of happened on that work tape on my little, digital recorder, that ended up being, we mimicked that for the record because it was so in the moment, so...
Well, think about what that song represents to you, your life, and I mean, your book and your story. That's kind of amazing. I take full credit.
I mean, it's kind of like part 2 of Picket Fences when you think about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway. We haven't written as many songs. I mean, we're still young. We still have songs to write. But given our experiences and time together and hours spent together walking and talking and being friends and getting on the phone, you would think we'd written, 50 songs together.
I'm okay with it.
Me too. I'd rather have the texts and the voice memos.
Exactly. I want you to, for people who don't know your story, it's such an important story. And I was anticipating this in a way I've never experienced before with anybody else, certainly on this show, which is still relatively new to me. But to have walked along with someone for a part of their journey that has had quite the twists and turns.
Yeah.
I've never really, other than watching you talk about it on Oprah or interviews, and the many conversations that we've had, especially subsequently, I just want you to talk as much as you feel like talking about. Let's start from the beginning. I don't really love to delve too much into where you're born and blah, 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 because like that's all on Wikipedia. You know what I mean? It's not conversational to me. Yeah. One thing I am fascinated about, as I am with anyone who has this in common with you, is being so focused and so single-minded about music from such a young age, when there was no one in your family that really did that, right?
No. I mean, everyone loved music and played an instrument, but there were no professional musicians.
And that's always really, really fascinating to me, coming from a musical family, a lineage,
right. Right.
So how old were you when you first had the thought, I want to do this, and what was the thing that sparked the thought?
Yeah, I was 4. And I knew I wanted to be like Loretta Lynn and Connie Smith.
From seeing them?
I didn't see them. I never saw them. I heard we had stacks and stacks of vinyl. And so that's what I did. I listened to what my parents were playing, and then they would let me. They trusted me with the record player. And Elvis and the Beatles were in those records, those stacks. And because I knew we were a country music household, I thought the Beatles and Elvis were country acts until I was, 15 or 16.
Were you as into them as you were the other?
I was very intrigued by the Beatles in the kind of chord, the chord structures and overtones and undertones. But it wasn't anything I could figure out on the piano.
Right.
I could figure out, but the Elvis still kind of feels country to me too.
A lot of it was.
Yeah. Little Sister. Some of those feel very country,
Love
rockabilly.
Me Tender.
Yeah. Very kind of rockabilly country-ish. Anyway, so as legend has it, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I became missing. So I lived in a small town called Wellsville, Kansas, and we were all outside doing whatever as a family, chores, I'm sure. I don't know, moving a stack of wood from one place to another just to do it. But apparently I became missing, and no one really got very concerned because they figured, she's in the front yard or whatever. Anyway, after a while, I was really missing, and a few people went looking for me, and I was found at the nursing home a couple of blocks away, and I had gathered a group of the elderly residents around the piano, and I guess I locked their wheelchairs and I had my first audience, but they found, I don't know.
I could see you like when they're locking it and going, they can't move.
That's right.
Here's a little song called Here, There, and Everywhere by the Beatles.
I was playing Frankie and Johnny that I had learned from my grandpa. So that started my relationship with old people. Mm-hmm. I love old people and dogs more than anything else. And that was when my nursing home circuit began, and that's where I hung out. They were my friends.
So you would go back?
I would go. I mean, I had a paper route, so I couldn't go. I couldn't go right after school, but I played every Sunday at that nursing home, and then branched out to other regional nursing homes.
You did the
tour.
I
was on tour.
Wow!
And so that was,
How long would you play?
An hour.
An hour.
And I had index cards with the names of my songs on them and the keys in which I played them. And the old people would kind of go through the cards and they'd have me play.
And it was you and the piano?
Just me and the piano.
Accompanying yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew the nursing home story, but I didn't know that. I thought it was like a one-time thing.
Oh, no, that was my life. And alongside that kind of doing that, it can't be overstated or understated, the value of having grown up in a small town where I had spoken my dream out loud. I told everyone, I'm going to be a country music star.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very rare that anyone said anything other than, I hope I get free tickets. I'm going to come see you on the Opry. So
you didn't have naysayers?
There were a couple. I had one teacher in high school, and by that time I was gigging and a lot and playing bars and honky-tonks and clubs. But I did have one teacher that, said it was immoral to play music where alcohol was served. And I quit basketball my senior year. And my coach told me, you're making it really, and I was a good player. We were going to state. We were very good. And he said, you're making a bad decision. And I said, I quit because he wouldn't let me miss one of the practices. And I had a gig. And I said, well, now I'm really in a pickle.
You had to make a choice.
I got to make a choice. And so that kind of growing up in a small town where everyone was like, yeah, she's probably gonna make it.
Well, the reinforcement of that is important, but the initial way of thinking, and this is what's so fascinating to me about everybody, and I didn't understand it really until maybe a dozen years ago. I always understood focus, drive, ambition, all that. This is different. Those things are the mechanisms to get you to realize the thing that really is important, which is you see yourself, you know it. Yeah. Of course you were going to have a number one song. Of course you were going to have a career. Of course you were going to play gigs and have a fan club and adoring fans. Of course you were, because you knew you were going to. It's the difference between the people who might even have more talent than all of us put together, but who say, oh, I'll never become a star. I'll never get a record deal. No, you won't.
No, that's right. You've sealed your fate. Right. So in the several county area of Wellsville, Kansas, Franklin, Johnson, I was arguably the best singer-songwriter going. And I went to Branson in between my junior and senior year of high school, did the Ozark Jubilee there. Felt pretty good about where I landed on the pole of talent. And then I moved to Nashville in 1989 and quickly realized, I'm not in Wellsville anymore. I'm not in Wellsville. And most people, I worked at a theme park called Opryland. Most people were better than I was, more naturally talented. And then I spent time on Music Row, trying to figure out how that ran, which fascinated me. The business piece fascinated me as much as the music, which I think we're going to get into that. Yep. But it was a great kind of shock to my system to realize so early, I'm not the best one here. And I knew it. And I was not, I don't want to say I was okay with it because I was 18. How can you be okay with oh my God? But I knew, okay, I will outwork them. I will out-effort them. And that was my goal. That was my plan. And at every turn, I just knew if I know more, I'm a better business person, am better with relationships. I do follow-ups. I study Bobby Braddock and Harlan Howard and study how they're writing these songs. I could have a chance. And I didn't have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Because I'm from a poor family in the Midwest, and there's something to be said for knowing there is no plan B.
Yeah, because you're likely to take it at the first hint of real rejection or stormy waters. You'll go, I don't need this. I'll just go do the other thing. Yeah,
confidence was never ever my problem. Even, and we're going to talk about, I'm sure, what it was like to live as a closeted country music artist, and one would think, well, she just didn't have the confidence to come out. I want to parse that out.
Do we ever need to get into that?
But it was, confidence was never, I think what my parents gave me was that, what they told us 3 kids was plan your work and work your plan. Don't be outworked. And I knew I was smart. I knew that I could, and I knew I was a good get done person.
Yeah.
And that
very
was
organized.
Very.
I remember actually the first time I ever heard that expression, and I really loved it when we first became friendly. You said to me, "You might out-sing me and you might outplay me, but you won't outwork me." And the level of and then I remember, this is when you were really out there working the Single White Female album, and then for the next couple of years, in the time that we spent together and worked together and hung out, I saw sometimes I would look at your schedule and I'd go like, how is she? And I remember you being absolutely, utterly exhausted.
Yeah.
And going through health stuff.
Yeah.
And
yep.
you showed up. And when you were like, when you said, I'm going to be there and I'm going to do this, there was no stopping it.
Yeah. And
I don't want to move too fast to how that same dynamic and that same collection of abilities and way of thinking has contributed to where you're at now. But I'm still sort of like, I want to hang on this for a second, because I need you to tell me, like I could tell you, you saw it, right? You could see yourself at the Grand Ole Opry. You rehearsed it. I'm sure you stood in front of a mirror many times. You even then, you're planning for that performance.
Everything was, yes, I did. And that may, for folks who haven't made their living in arts and entertainment, it may sound grandiose, or who does she think she is that she would end up on the Grand Ole Opry stage? But where else was I going to end up? Like, duh. Yeah. And I will tell you, when I was working at the Jubilee in Branson between my junior and senior year of high school, I landed an audition for a TV show on the Nashville network called You Can Be a Star.
I remember.
And it was essentially the kind of first American Idol. And so my parents drove to Branson, and I took a day off, or maybe it was the day I didn't have a show. We drove to Nashville. I did the audition. Didn't make it. And that's a whole nother set of lessons in and of itself. But we had like an hour, and we drove to downtown Nashville, and the Ryman. We wanted to go see the Ryman. We go up to the door, and the doors are closed, and they're not doing tours. And I was like, oh shoot, I really wanted to see the Ryman. So I walked around to the back alley, and there was a janitor back there. And I said, I'm from Kansas, and I really want to see it inside. And he was like, yeah, I'll let you in here. So he let my mom and my dad and I in there. He let us in there. Objective case, sorry. You can cut that. I just nominative case.
I saw it. I was like, wow, all the people.
I know.
Never saw that one coming.
How embarrassing. Now I'm embarrassed. Yeah. We get inside the Ryman, and we're standing kind of looking at the stage. We're like in that middle aisle, maybe at row 25. And there's that microphone stand that says WSM Grand Ole Opry. And my parents said, go up there, get up there, go up there, we'll take your picture. I was like, oh, okay. So I walked up there, and they said, sing something. And I said, no. And they said, why not? Because I'm not shy. And I said, I don't want to sing on the Grand Ole Opry stage until it's real. And a few months after that, I would move to Nashville. And a few months after that, September 16th of 1989.
My birthday.
Yeah. I sang on the Grand Ole Opry, the big stage of the Grand Ole Opry. I sang You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man and Blue Moon of Kentucky. And behind me sat Mr. Acuff. And I did it. And I knew not to spoil. After. Yeah.
Yeah, and all those. I am starting to become a little allergic to the word manifestation, but because I feel like it has been commandeered in ways that are not befitting of the power of the word. But any example of a manifestation that comes true like that just furthers the next one. Like once you've done that, you go, well,
that's a really good point.
I believe that. You saw it in your mind, and then you experienced it. So why would you stop there? And you probably, at this point, you didn't have a record deal, right?
No.
Yeah.
No,
so,
it would take me years to get a record deal.
So you're going, I'm going to get a record deal, and I'm going to have a number one song, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to play with that person, and I'm going to write with the whatever. And those things, to my knowledge, all happened. So for those of us who have...
Except becoming a member of the Grand Ole Opry. That did not happen for me.
Well, that's part of our other conversation, though, I think. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into that, but I mean...
I had to rewind. That was really... there's a lot
I never saw anyone... I mean, the fact is you were absolutely deserving. But I also, especially at the time when I met you in the late 90s, there was this... That was when the pop versus country thing was really in full, damn that Shania Twain for having, Faith Hill for putting out a kind of poppy single.
Right, they took a lot of flack.
And it was like this real line in the sand.
Yeah.
And you just so consistently waved the flag of traditional country music and the Grand Ole Opry. Never, ever in a disparaging way to other music.
Right.
Because some people did that.
Yeah.
But you just were so, your dedication and your loyalty and your love, your just sheer love for the Grand Ole Opry and for that institution was so evident that I thought, well, just that alone they'll have her in.
Yeah. So after I played the Opry for the first time in 1989, I without a record deal, I was playing the Opry quite a bit. And then I became Porter Wagner's, as he called it, girl singer. And so I was at the Opry all the time. And then when I signed my first major label deals, Polygram, Polydor, A&M, whatever they're called, they were called at that time, I actually had record label folks tell me to stop talking about the Opry so much in interviews because it was pigeonholing me into like a throwback kind of niche thing. And if you want to get on commercial country radio, you can't be that because no one was doing that. And I did it. And thank you for seeing that and reflecting on that. And I never took my eye off the Opry wasn't. People weren't playing it back then. New artists weren't.
Right.
And I don't even know how many times. And then when I got signed at Universal, I continued to do it. And there was a moment in I think the early 2000s that there was a rumor going around that I was about to be named as the next member. And it was exciting. It was exciting because I knew I was worthy of it. So it wasn't like, that could never happen. I thought it's probably going to happen. I've spent, I was on the road all the time. And if I had a Saturday night, I would go out and do the Opry and champion the Opry. And so I wasn't obviously named as that next artist. And then when I came out of the closet, those invitations to play, I know that the Opry institution, they want to, there's a lot that happened, but those invitations didn't happen anymore. And I had to rewire myself because I was so disappointed that after I came out, I wasn't super surprised that they didn't throw a ticker tape parade for me at the Opry, but I thought I would be invited back.
Well, you up to that point, you never thought you would be unwelcome there. Did it feel like you were unwelcome?
Yes. In that if there's a consistent pattern of every time I have a record out or have something that I'm out there working on the road, if every time my manager received a call, hey, when's Shelley going to come back out? You see she's doing this. We'd love her to come do this new song. I know she's got the reading, writing, and rhythm event or whatever. Have her, would love to have her come out. All of that happened very consistently pre-record deal and during record deals since 1989. And then I came out in 2010 and the phone never rang again. So to what extent that felt purposeful or exclusive, not inclusive. Yeah, it hurt my feelings. And then I had, for years, I waited for that invitation. There was even like this big petition online that the Opry thought I started. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, my manager was like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And they were like, shut that petition down. The petition was invite Shelley back to the Opry.
It was organic.
It was organic, and it just kind of fizzled out. I mean, it had a lot of signatures, but it really upset the Opry. And yet they didn't say, well, let's fix that. Let's shut this thing down. Come do the Opry. That didn't happen. And so I had rewired my expectation because I knew it was never going to happen. And I had to kind of fall out of love with the Opry, which was really hard to do for a kid who had, since 1974, was obsessed with the Grand Ole Opry. And
did you ever have an opportunity to have a conversation with anybody there about it?
I didn't. My manager was fielding some calls.
To this day, you've never run into somebody who was there back then and said...
Yeah. So making myself fall out of love, I will never play the Opry again, is what I had to tell myself as a protective measure. And then in 2019, I live in New York, and I have since 2008. I was making dinner for my boys and washing dishes, and my text popped up, and it was Russell, my manager. And he said, hey, kind of oddball, out of left field, Gina from the Opry, Gina Keltner, who is now the new head of the Opry, wants to know if you'd like to come play the Opry. And I dried my hands and said, would love to. Just like that. And he said, give me your dates. And I said, I'll actually be there in August of 2019. And I played the Opry again for the first time, and I haven't played it since. I haven't been invited back since. Of course, there was a global pandemic. A lot of things have happened. So I'm not suggesting that I'm being left out, but was that something healing for me. And also, I didn't just go out there and do my 2 songs, which is typically what you do as an artist. You go out and do a couple of your hits. Yep. Thank you. A little banter in between. Thanks so much. But I didn't know I was going to do what I did. But what I did was, I think, Shut Up and Drive. And then this thing, unrehearsed, and I'm a pretty good extemporaneous speaker, as are you. But this kind of unrehearsed thing came out of me. And I'll try to sum it up quickly.
You don't have to. We have plenty of time.
Thank you. What I shared with the audience, and you can see the Opry, you played the Opry. It's not like a dark audience and you can't see the faces.
Right.
It's like a TV show. Right. They're staring at you and you can see every face in the crowd. And it's marvelous. It's one of the things that's so wonderful about the Opry. And what I said was, 30 years ago, I walked onto this stage. 1989, 2019. And I was an unsigned artist, and I didn't know if that would be my last time to ever be on stage. And as I walked off the stage at age 18, back in the day, people had cameras with flash bulbs. And I remembered looking out, and this was what I shared in 2019 with the crowd. I said, I remembered as I walked off stage and walked toward the stars who were side stage, and Mr. Acuff he had just taken the mic back from me. And I walked off stage and I thought to myself, and I knew that I was a gay person. And I said this I knew that I was a lesbian, and that if I were ever found out, I would most certainly never have a chance to make records and be invited back to the Grand Ole Opry stage. And as I walked off, I remembered taking my own photo in my mind of the audience. And I waved like I'd seen all of the Opry stars. I was emulating that wave that they do. And I remembered thinking, if I never get to come back, I have this picture. And it delights me 30 years later that I'm standing in front of you. And I thought I was coming back to heal that 18-year-old, those fears. But what I realized is I came back tonight to be on the stage because I love the Grand Ole Opry. And the 40-plus-year-old, however I was at that age, I thought I was coming back for the 18-year-old me, but I'm actually here for the 49-year-old me who's still in love with the Grand Ole Opry.
Wow.
And as I shared that, I watched people who'd been clapping, who'd seen me on the Opry many, many times. And the minute I said lesbian, their arms dropped. And the more I talked, some, not all, some arms crossed. And I remember pushing through, and some people like got on their feet. Like it was a true bifurcated audience. And I remember pushing through that 18-year-old thing that you don't break the rules at the Opry. You don't break the rules in country music. I remember thinking, I already broke the rules. I rewrote new rules. And as I walked off the stage, my band, many of whom had been with me my entire career, like just grabbed me and hugged me. And I remember Eric Halbig saying to me, how hard was that? And I said, it was pretty tense. And he said, do you realize what you did in those few minutes on stage? And I said, like what? And he said, because that guy that crossed his arms and those people who crossed their arms and stopped clapping, they had to look around at others who were standing and ask themselves, I guess I'm the asshole.
Yeah.
And that, my friend, he said, is progress.
Yeah.
And it was great.
Wow. You never told me that story. That's fantastic.
I mean, you've played that Opry stage. It's whether you grew up making pop records or R&B record. It is the mother church of...
It's hollow ground.
Yeah.
Hollow ground.
Yeah.
But to make that statement...
I said lesbian. I wasn't just, because the Opry had not been known for inviting... after I came out 15 years ago.
But weren't you really the first known country music star to ever come out?
Yes, I was. Yes, I am.
And the fact that it happened as...
Let me caveat. Kristen Hall of Sugarland, one of the founding members, was, and she wasn't, I'm not sure how long she was
arguably, no
with the band.
disrespect to her, I wouldn't call her a country music star herself.
She was in a
very successful.
But in terms of what the fans and the public, it was kind of those queer artists who had existed in whispers, and there were many, right?
Yeah.
But there was a governing on what the audience could know.
Right.
I was the first who had her name on my records and name on the side of my bus. Embarrassing as that was, Coca-Cola made me do that for that tour. But my name on the tickets, and I was the first to raise my hand and say, all the things you know about me, I am also a gay woman. I was the first to do that, to own that in that way.
And hard fought. Boy, hard fought. That whole path and journey for you, much of which even I, as your close friend, was not part of.
Yeah.
The way you the way you navigated so much of that time alone. Mm-hmm. And we all go through, then we look back and go, it could have been easier. Yeah. I could have called Richard, or I could have,
100%.
But you do. We walk the steps that we choose to walk. It just feels in 2025 like such a ridiculous conversation, especially when you think that it wasn't really all that long ago.
Yeah.
And I'm also not saying that we've come so far and now there's none of that anymore.
Yeah.
If you got up and made that same speech tomorrow night at the Grand Ole Opry, there would still be people who would.
Right.
But I'm just fascinated because you're so articulate about it. I think about all the work that goes into becoming a successful recording artist. And all the sacrifice. Living it, breathing it, eating it, sleeping it. I think about the stress and pressure that I experienced. Mm-hmm. Having to come up with more material, having to deliver again, the wear and tear on the road, thinking about album covers and photos and what my image is and what is, and to do that. And when I think about how stressful that was for me, like all artists, and then I think about what it must have been like for you to do all of that and also hide your sexuality. And not just hide it, be so fearful that to be yourself, you would be punished.
And lose everything. Yeah. Number one, you are so right that we look back, and I know I could have called you. I know I could have called my best friend Chuck. I know I could have shared this information with a number of people. And I also had a calculus that I knew people asked my friends about me. And I didn't want anyone to have to lie for me.
I get that.
Because you would have. I think you would have. And
I have for other friends.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think I wouldn't.
Yeah. And you, deep into our friendship, I'm sure, because I know, people would whisper to you, I think Shelley's gay. So I know it was on your radar. You never asked me, which was kind. Because I would have, wasn't big into lying, but I would have, I would have lied to you. And the lying, whether implicit or explicit, was a real tipping point for me. And one of the things that I realized, I'm not just keeping the truth from the light. There was a scenario in which someone asked me outright, "Are you gay?" And I felt very unsafe. And I said no. And that night I was like, I'm now an actual liar. And that was hard, really hard for me. But the pressure and stress of, the gift of the pressure and stress as an artist, the gift that is, I got to write a next record. I got to write great stuff like I did. What a freaking gift to have that pressure. So I want to note that, but I also want to say it was hard work. Yeah. I never disparage a musician, whether I like their sound or think that they're auto-tuned too much. I know what it takes to get on the record. I know what it takes to get a record deal, to get a record out there, to get a record up the charts, and to have...
It's a miracle every time.
It's a miracle. It's like 0.00019% of people get to do it.
And I don't know that the general public really understands that. It's funny, I was talking about this with John Cryer sitting here and relating it to the film. Yeah. And relating it to the film world as well. And we were talking about, do you know how fucking hard it is to have a hit anything?
Yeah.
The things that have to align.
Yeah.
At the perfect time.
Yep.
If one of those factors isn't involved, it makes all the difference. People don't really understand. They just think that hits happen. It's so hard to have a hit anything.
It is, and they're not supposed to understand, much in the same way that everyone thinks that they can shoot the ball like LeBron James and Michael Jordan. It's magic.
Right.
It's literally magic. But actually what it is, it's reps. It's what you and Kenny G were talking about. Yeah. It's 10,000 hours, 50,000 hours writing the song. Like how many crappy songs have we written to get to the good one, right? Well, as evidenced by your hallway with the hardware. Anyway, so your question was, your remark was the pressure to become and be an artist, and with the pressure of hiding, and then I'll also say you have to be a business person.
Yeah.
The ones who didn't see it as the music business and just were like, I just show up when my manager tells me. Most of them didn't have long careers.
Correct.
So you and I took it on. We loved the business piece, and so I was a business person who had employees that worked for me and I was their only job, and they had kids and they had needs. And so I had that. I was an artist. And then my third full-time job was a hider. And, you know, I was asked after I came out, how does that feel? Like, how relieved are you? I'm like, well, if you have a job as a janitor, a school teacher, and a nurse, and you get to quit one of those full-time jobs, pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You get a lot of free time. And I think about all the songs I didn't write.
Yes.
Because I was so stressed out. And and this is why I love your wife. When you guys got together and became Daisy and Richard, she pushed you to celebrate, like hang your stuff on the wall, celebrate your milestones. And you didn't do that before in our long years of friendship. And I, as a closeted person, I miss so many great moments to just go, yeah, we did it. Yes. Because I had this black cloud following me around. And it was the more famous I got, the bigger the black cloud got, the bigger the stakes got.
The bigger the fear.
The bigger the fear. And the bigger, like, I used to have these fantasies when I was 19, 20, that when I get a record deal and when I'm on the Academy of Country Music Awards show and I receive an award, I'm going to receive it and say, I'm a gay person. And that sounds really great when you don't have employees and when you're just dreaming and you don't get it. But then by the time you have that first kind of smaller hit and then, you know, get lucky enough to sign to MCA Records after 2 failed records, and Tony Brown, the head of the label, signed you, and you've got this #1 record, and you've got all these people who are paying their kids' tuition. It gets trickier to say, I'm going to go up on that TV show stage and declare my gayness. And by the way, singing and writing and making records, I like to frame this for people who might be plumbers or attorneys or teachers.
Right.
How many of you, if you went to school to become a teacher and you're in your town and you've gotten tenure as a teacher, how many of you would say the thing that would cause you to never get to teach another class in your life? How many of you electricians, attorneys would voluntarily say the thing that would ensure that you never get to use that training again? The job that provides your mortgage, the job that provides your health insurance. It sounds easier than it is. Well, I've had people say, I wouldn't be able to like lie like that. I would have
no idea.
They have no idea. And that, which is why, Richard, I wrote my book and why I allowed the documentarians to follow me around during my coming out process, because I wanted to make I could have gone to Twitter and tweeted, hey, y'all, I'm gay, or MySpace, whatever it was at the time. I could have done that. But you know that strategy is in my DNA. Everything is about strategy. Mm-hmm. And I did not want to just come out. I wanted to come out well, and I wanted to tell the whole story of what it's like to be a person of faith, a person salt of the earth, Midwestern roots, support the troops, love the Grand Ole Opry. Also, I have known I was gay since I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty easy from people. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about how I came out, and even people who said, I don't really think she's gay. I think she's doing it for the money. What? I'm sorry.
I remember that. I remember we talked about that.
What money?
Yeah. Send it my way.
I even had...
If I did it for... Hey, here's my Venmo.
Hit me.
Here's my...
I even had, and I talked in my book and very publicly about almost ending my life.
I know.
And with a gun that my parents bought me for protection. I even had people that worked closely with me in Nashville that didn't like that I came out, that wrote to a bunch of journalists and people that she doesn't even own a gun. I mean, it's just the inability for people to say, damn, I kind of thought she was gay, but damn, she owned it.
Yeah.
Like, why was that so hard? And now I know why. And I'll stop in a second. But now I know why. It's because if you are part of a systemic institution that is historically and systemically otherizing or not inclusive, the minute you acknowledge that it is, it's somehow a referendum on what you didn't do to fix it. And then you have to do something about it. So it was easier for folks to say, oh, everybody knew she was gay. Well, the fans didn't. Now they do. And it was easy to say, well, she hadn't had a hit in a long time.
Oh, God.
That wasn't hard to do. It's hard to do. And it's hard for a teacher to do. And it's hard for an engineer to do. And I wouldn't change a single step of what I did and how I did it and what I said and how I owned it.
It was brilliant and beautiful, and yours, all yours.
It just gave me chills.
It was all yours. You owned it. You took it. You got to do with that what you had been prevented from for so long.
And I wasn't outed. That was really important to me.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this, and I don't, but there's a superficiality to it, I guess, even in the framing of the question. But I want to know if it's just me or whether it is something to even discuss. It also seemed to me, not just as someone who knew you, but if I could divorce myself from that and just look at you as a fan of what you did. Mm-hmm. And this has become maybe a little less common. I'm sorry, a little more common over the years. Go ahead.
You know me.
But back then, there was also the factor of the way you looked. In that you were a hot, gorgeous chick. And that was also maybe, here's the thing. When you were struggling with all this, you were also being smart enough to, on the heels of Single White Female, and that when you were those few years when you were trying to follow that up and you put out a couple more albums, the way you were photographed, the way you looked on stage, you were working it like the hot chick you were. The Never Love You Enough video, you look like a supermodel. I would guess that there are some people who would, in retrospect, go, "Well, that was just all phony." Mm-hmm. No, she was just being the artist that she was. She just happened to be hot. But I wonder if did any of those decisions make the whole thing more difficult for you? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Oh, yes. And it's a great question. And I'm not sure anyone has ever asked to kind of
unpack
it in the way that you have. And I love that you have. No, it didn't make it harder. Let me first acknowledge that the privilege I had of being a femme lesbian was a giant one. So in I think of it in terms of assimilating. I could pass.
Yeah.
I could code switch.
You didn't. It's not that you could. You did.
Yeah.
You 100%
and I've
did.
got a little tomboy side of me, though.
Yes, but that's only if you know you.
Yeah.
And also, so does Daisy.
Also, but you know the femme part of me as well.
Yes.
So it's not that just if you know me, you see the tomboy side and the femme side.
I know the girly girl in you big time.
I'm a girly girl.
Big time.
And so, Loretta Lynn said something to me early on, and it was about gender in the music industry. And I asked her when I signed my first deal, I said, how do you, they told you couldn't write songs back in the day. And by the way, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, male or female, very prolific, wrote a lot of important hit records. And I said, how did you handle this kind of male-dominated world? And by the way, I'd been in a male-dominated world, gigging back in Kansas and in Missouri. I got it. I was always the only girl in the room. But I wanted her counsel I wanted her to tell me some secret about how it's not like that here. And she said, oh, you're not going to change this industry. She said, you just get in there. And she said, you bend until you think you might break. And she said, she used a sports analogy metaphor, which is unusual for her, but she said, you can't change the game unless you're on the field.
Boom.
And that made me understand that, my goal was not to have hit records so I could come out. That was an evolution. I thought I could hide it forever. But I wanted to, I realized after Single White Female, or during that my then label, MCA Records, was pushing me more and more to use every skill, every arrow in my quiver, which included, how I looked. And I was not going to change the music industry and make it more pure and righteous, and it's just about the music. I wanted to stay on the field because I wanted to keep making records and doing the thing I came to do. Mm-hmm. And that included, but was not limited to, videos that we spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars on, wardrobe, hair and makeup. I brought my own hair and makeup person with me around the globe at great expense, right?
Yeah.
And I did what I had to do. And I looked, it was genuine. The feminine part of me, and I've had a lot of conversations about this. The feminine part of me, for those who say she was faking being straight, I'm like, no, my girlfriend loved how I looked too.
I'll bet.
So I think the lens through which you see femininity.
That's what's important. That's why I asked the question, because it's really...
And it's a great thing to unearth, because I can hold several, again, I grew up on a farm. I'm a tomboy. I own rental houses. I like to change toilet kits. I can spackle and do little electrical and plumbing. And when I'm doing that, I've got my cargo pants on and my t-shirt and hair up in a messy ponytail. And I feel as comfortable as the tomboy me as I do as the femme me in 4-inch heels. I really do. I really do.
Yeah. You're so you no matter what the scenario. But I thank you for unpacking that for me, because it was especially in retrospect, looking back at some of the videos and the photo shoots and the way you were working it, the way you were working it as an artist works it. You were using whatever you had in your toolbox, which happened to be beauty and sexuality, just like I did in the ways that I did, and anybody else does. It had nothing to do with whether you were gay or not. It was like, I'm an artist, and this is part of the thing. People want their stars to look great.
It's a persona. And by the way, I would argue, you're a straight dude, obviously, and I know girls were throwing themselves at you, but you had a good number of male fans.
I still do.
And I had a good number of women who, some fan came up to me, who followed me. A male fan approached me after I came to a book signing of mine. It's really interesting to go to someone's book signing, to wait for the Q&A to degrade them. But many people did that. It was rare, but it happened. And it usually had a kind of religious, kind of Christian evangelical bent to it. You don't say. But this one guy came, and I've forgotten where it was. I think it was Chicago. But in the Q&A, he raised my hand and he said, I feel so betrayed. He said, I loved you. You were so hot. I had such a crush on you. I've been to 40 of your shows. I feel so betrayed. And he said, I want to know what you have to say about that. And no one had ever said that to me before. And I pondered and I said, well, what's your name? And he said, like, Darren or whatever. And I said, Darren, you have the same shot with me now that you did back then. Nothing's changed.
I never thought I could love you more than I did a few minutes ago.
Thank you.
Holy
Thank you.
Oh my God. Well done. Did the audience cheer?
They erupted.
Yeah.
And
did he leave?
He left. He was angry.
He was properly humiliated.
He ended up coming.
But first of all, for him to make all of your life about him.
Well, he did write to me years later, and he said, I can't believe what a
he got it.
Oh, I was. He said he had watched the movie, a couple of years after my coming out, and he said, I realized that wasn't about me. And he said, I think he got married, and his wife said, how could you say that to her? Something, he had a moment.
Wow. That's extra special asshole.
Yeah, but we're all on our journeys to understanding, but, to the point of like that I don't lead with and never have led with sex and in my personal life. I don't show up that way.
You're a little bit of a prude.
I know. But on stage, my job the job is to sing your song and
I know you're a prude because for how many years we've been friends
26.
Now? Yeah. Jeez. I have hit you with some very blue humor now and then, which you love, but I can see you kind of blushing.
I'm a little bit.
You're a little bit of a prude.
Yeah.
I say it with love.
I know you do.
Before I forget, because you just led me to something else. I never thought about this before. In terms of artists, successful artists who are closeted.
Yeah.
But they're also working it in a way that is similar to what we're talking about, where you're doing your artist thing and you're in a bikini in this video or you're looking gorgeous. And when I think about someone like Ricky Martin, who had this legion of female fans, I'm sure still does, but took a while to come out. George Michael, who was outed. I'd be curious to see if George Michael would have come out, but
me too.
But when he was outed, the way he handled it and handled himself I thought was pretty bad. But I wonder, obviously George isn't impossible, but I wonder, wouldn't you love to have a conversation with someone like that about your common experiences?
I have.
You have?
I have, yeah. And again, just circling back to the Ricky Martin shaking it like no one could ever shake. I mean, man is gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big old gay, and I'm like, nice, he's pretty.
Yeah.
I think seeing it through the lens of who was he dancing for? Who was he performing for? And if the women in the audience thought they had a shot with him, well done, Ricky. And if the men in the audience were, having quiet or out loud fantasies about him, well done. It's just because it's like a cause and effect. Just because the male fans were loving me. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's Ricky Martin, just as he shows up in the world, and George Michael, they were just like on fire, like in terms of charisma and sex appeal. And most of the rest of it were putting it on a little bit to try to,
but I think about it in terms of their fear.
Well, watch the documentary about George Michael, and he's gone and can't tell. I wish he were right here, and I wish Ricky were right here.
Yeah.
And I know that I know about Ricky's journey, and I think he and I walked a lot of the same, although he was a million times more famous than I was. But the stakes are high for anyone, whether you have had one hit record or all of the hit records.
Look at Barry Manilow, who really didn't come out until he was in his 70s.
Yeah. Because,
and he's talked about it a lot, I really thought my career would end. I really thought my fans would desert me.
Well, yeah, and watch listen to Barry, listen to, Elton John shape-shifted himself through life. George Michael, we all did the same things, which was we had to shape-shift ourselves because this was our thing. This was not just out of college. I think I'm going to get an internship at, Bank of America, and I like finance. This was the thing we all decided to do when we were 4. You were a kid on your dad's lap, and you were like, well, duh, that's what I'm going to do. And when no one has gone before you, and it's a road less traveled, it's not being paranoid to think, if I came out in 2000, they would have let me. They would not have let me.
But you said something it was in the midst of a bigger point that I didn't want to interrupt. But I want to interrupt now because I don't want to get too far from it. And this is something that is so important in this discussion, but also an extra indicator as to why I love you and what kind of person you are. What you said in this extended quote tonight was your concern about the people who were also connected to you and your success. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just your own fear of losing it all, losing the career, but you believed, and rightfully so, that had you come out, that it would have been over. Mm-hmm. And you even verbalized it, that part of that fear was, I'm employing these people. If it all goes away from me, they're That's so much stress. I hate that you went through that. I hate that for you. I really do. It's so up.
It's bad, and it was an equal kind of commensurate division of, I was scared, I loved my job, I didn't have the courage to do it. I didn't, because no one had ever done it. I didn't know how to do it. And let me go back over to the other bucket. Equally, I had people who were counting on me, people who had stayed with me through 2 failed records, 6 failed singles. They stayed with me when they had job offers from other artists that were going up the charts. They hitched their wagon to my star. And it was incumbent upon me to make it. And I was their leader. Guys, it's all right, the next record, we're gonna get them. I was their leader. And my lighting it all on fire would also be lighting their career trajectory. And it's hard to get a gig with an artist on the radio. Yeah. That's hard to do. Yeah. And back over to that other bucket. I was scared. I didn't have the courage. No one had ever done it before. And Richard, I think one of the biggest pieces of that bucket was I had to acknowledge that I'd been lying.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me because at my core, I am an honest person. And I had set up my career and my life such that I trained people. They didn't, if they asked me about my personal life, I would be flippant, or I'm so busy, I'm married to my job. I had all those answers. Mm-hmm. You saw me give those, but I'd never really put myself into a position to where I had to lie. And then came a conversation with a person in our industry. We were in a car and he asked me, and he'd been drinking. And I don't want to say I felt physically unsafe. I didn't. Mm-hmm. I felt just
bad energy.
I felt unsafe I cannot tell this person my truth because this person, I knew his feelings about gay people. I knew some issues that he had that were rooted in evangelical Christianity. And when he asked it, there was no way he was going to, it was so caustic, the way he asked
and
it.
Pointed.
And I answered, he said, "You're not gay, are you?" And I paused and I said, "No, I'm not gay." And he said, "Thank God. That shit's not right. That would never stand." And when I left that night, we had been watching an NCAA basketball game together. When I left that night, I went home, and my girlfriend of 12 years, we had a home and a koi pond and plants and dogs and a life. And the next morning I told her I want to break up. And it would take a couple of months for me to tell her, we sold the house. And I finally told her why. And I said, we're doing it. And to undo the big lie that I'd been telling the world implicitly, that I'm this, and I dated men, right? Yeah. I dated some really phenomenal people. And that was a lie too. And they didn't know, they weren't my beard. They really didn't know. And I wasn't I was just like, if I can never be a queer gay woman who loves openly a woman, I'm going to partner up with someone that my values align with and that I can laugh with. And a lot of people do that, by the way. Yeah. So it wasn't that I was using them. I did appreciate that it helped me hide. Yeah. But that wasn't the means to hiding. No, it was, but to write the hardest part I wrote in my book was a sentence, and I remember where I was when I wrote it. I'd moved to New York. I was in my apartment in Shelley, and I wrote, I became a skilled liar. And I can't tell you how many times I hit delete, wrote it again, delete. It was really hard for me. And I sat with the Bishop Gene Robinson, who was the first openly gay Episcopal priest. He was part of my coming out.
I remember.
I had a team of advisors, some in faith communities and others in nonprofits and education, people who knew their shit about queer people, because I knew nothing. I was not just in the closet, I was behind the sheetrock. I knew nothing. And I needed these people to get me, to educate me such that when I came out, I was an educated voice for my community. But the Bishop, Gene Robinson, and I were having breakfast, and he said, "What's the hardest part of this?" And I said, "I have to admit I was lying." He said, "Well, how does that make you feel?" And I said, "Humiliated, embarrassed, smaller than I know I am." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm going to help you out here." I said, "Okay." And he was putting cream cheese on a bagel. And he said, "You ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "It's not your business what other people think of you."
Boom. Wow, that's really good.
Oh. And he said, they're going to think you were a liar. And he said, "What will your response be to that?" I was like, then I could
yeah.
I could take a step, and then I could say, and what I did say to people was, "Yeah, I was lying. And if you're interested to know why I felt like I had to, I'd love to have that conversation." And it was just almost like this ton of bricks was really, it's not my business what other people think of my being gay, how I came out. It's just so liberating that I care what people think about me.
Sure.
But it's not my business if they think poorly of me. I can't change their minds, and I'm not going to try.
That's beautiful. What a gift he gave you, just with that sentence. Because sometimes it takes something like that, right, to just be your
North Star.
Yeah.
One more thing. I know we're going along, but I want to share something with you about a gentleman by the name of Reverend Peter Gomes. He was a Harvard man of the cloth, a theologian, black man, queer man of faith. And he was once asked he was many times asked about his journey and the intersections of being a black man who was queer, who was a faith leader. And he said, yeah, people told me a lot. You can't be gay. You cannot be a gay man who's black. You cannot be a queer man who's black. You cannot be a queer man who's black, who's a person of faith and a leader in the faith community. And the person asked him, well, what did you say in response to that? And he said, well, the only response I could give was, I offer my life as evidence to the contrary.
Ooh.
Oh. Oh. He was.
I love that.
He just was.
What era? What was his?
He passed after I came out. He and I were in a documentary together, and I met him. I was lucky to meet him. And
so he was a black queer man of faith in the 50s and 60s.
Oh yeah.
God.
And not just a man of faith, a man of the cloth.
Yes. Yeah.
I offer my life as evidence to the contrary.
Before we steer a little bit, I do want to touch on that for a second, because I've loved the conversations that we've had over the last 10 years about your conviction of faith, which we are completely the opposite.
Yes, we are.
I dabbled in it. I tried.
You gave it a hell of a shot.
I gave it a hell of a shot for many years. Mm-hmm. And finally decided, nope, I'm out. And I love that you're one of my friends who I can have that discussion with, and like we accept each other. And,
yeah.
But I really have admired among all the other ways that you have conducted yourself in your life and your message as a gay woman and an activist, really. I mean, really, that you've become that. But I really love your protection of your faith. When I say that, like, the people who are so dogmatic, who feel like you can't be a Christian and be a gay woman, it's an abomination, all that bull.
Yeah.
I've seen you handle it actually on social media. I've seen you handle it in conversation. And this is one of my favorite words in the world, elegance. And the way you handled it has always been so elegant, because you don't get angry. You don't call them out. You just basically respond with, yeah, I know, but I am all those things. I am all these things. Despite you telling me I'm not allowed to be, I am anyway. I love that.
Thank you. I received that. That is a big deal to hear from you, because I know, like, we have had a lot of conversations about faith. I don't feel responsible to make everyone think the way I do. I think the most powerful, and by the way, faith is a practice, just like yoga or,
yes,
I have questions. Like, there are days when I really have to, I have a lot of pretty hard conversations with the universe and with God. There are times I'm like, it's not real. It can't be. There's no way that someone can go into a school and shoot, a bunch of kindergartners and first graders. I don't think
anybody who is a critical thinker can just have blind faith.
I can't, and I don't. That said, and one of my other spiritual mentors, the late Reverend C. Welton Gaddy, said something to me once about faith for me, because he was my spiritual advisor. He said, Shelley, there are people who need to know the scripture and they're called to go spread the good word. And he was one of those people. Mm-hmm. And he said, by and large, you're one of the people, and there are many, and should be more, that the faith is not actually, for me, I see it as not actually my keys to the afterlife. Because I don't even know, I can't even imagine what salvation looks like. Yeah. But my faith actually makes my here and now better.
That's all that matters.
And that, for me, is, I'm a better person because I contemplate notions of purpose and connectivity, and I've been all over the world. I've seen faiths practiced, many different faiths practiced. I know there's not one key to the kingdom.
No.
And that gets me really, it makes a lot of evangelicals upset when I say that. But I'm not, they can go to their church and do what they do.
Right.
And thank God we're free to do that. And I'm free to just be, it's my business. I just am. As Reverend Gomes said, I offer my life as evidence to the contrary.
Before we wrap up, I need you to talk about, we have alluded to your business sense and your business acumen. One thing about you that I knew from the get-go was how smart you were. Your
say more. No.
Your sense of big picture, your sense of wanting to know what everybody's role is and what everybody does and how it works, your curiosity, would naturally make sense for me that it would lead you into the sort of other career that you have. So tell me how you got into really the corporate world and where you're at. And
yeah. A friend of mine sent me a headline a couple of weeks ago, and the headline, because they've announced my new corporate role, and the headline said, "Queer country music star pivots to C-suite." And she sent me a screen grab of it and just sent a weird smiley face, and she was like, "Oh, that headline." Yeah. And I said, yeah. And I said,
factually incorrect.
And I said,
factually correct, but
I said, it's meh. But I said, and I'm the only human being on the planet about whom that headline can be written.
Right.
That's cool.
Right.
So remember when we talked about my getting to Nashville and realizing how, I don't want to say not special my talents were, but
just seeing having a new perspective.
Yeah, I was no longer the best in the room, and that's when my love of, come on, I had a paper route in first grade. I was hustling. I understood P&L when I threw the Lawrence Daily Journal World when I was 6, and so I had a natural kind of draw toward business and strategy and execution. And so when I came out of the closet in 2010, that kind of began what I called then a side hustle of doing, corporate culture work and what we would call D&I back then. It's now DEIB or DEI now. But I learned the value of my skill set being that I could share my personal story, and also I was a proven leader. I'd led my organization and my teams for a long time. So all of these skills that seemed really unique to being a country music artist, kind of like whack-a-mole. Like if they got pushed down at all in my country music career, they kind of popped up in this other space. I'm like, that's interesting. So, but I had a refusal to do that more, that corporate work, consulting for corporations and doing that work, the higher ed, faith communities, because Richard, it scared me. What if I did it 50-50 of my time? What if so I kept it like at 30% of my time because I was still clinging to what would that mean of me as an artist, a writer, a creative, if I did corporate culture work 60% of my time? It's
really redefining your identity in a way, even to yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And even though I'd made that decision when I came out I think I decided 2006-ish, 2007-ish to come out, that was a release of an identity. But it's not binary. It's a process. It wasn't like you release it and then you are okay being who you are. It was a process. And in 2010, I wasn't ready to not be still that artist. So when COVID hit, I was on tour, like all of us, and had to go home and, keep moving my tour dates out 2 more weeks. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like how crazy that we're like, oh, this thing will be gone in 2 more weeks.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah. Just don't cancel anything.
Yeah, just push it out to June.
Yeah.
Anyway, at that time, you'll recall, pandemic, George Floyd had been murdered, Breonna Taylor had been murdered, and people were doing virtual work. And so all of my existing clients, almost all of them, were reaching out to, can you convene a workshop? Can you do this? And hard conversations were being had, not just about equity and DE&I, but just about mental health and storytelling and connectivity. And then I took on a new client in a global design build firm called Unispace. I consulted for them for a while. And then my boss at the time said, hey, would you, maybe it was like early 2021. He said, would you consider like a full-time job? And I'm like looking over and I'm like, we're still in quarantine. Yeah, okay. So I pivoted into a corporate space.
God, I still remember the phone call.
What did
you said, Ricardo, I got it. I have something to tell you.
Do you think I was going to share with you that I'm straight?
Decided I'm straight.
I'm actually straight. It was all for the money.
And when you said, I'm going full corporate, I'm getting a job. I'm taking a job.
Yeah.
And you were like, but you were so excited about it. I loved it. I was so happy for you. Yeah. So carry
Yeah.
on.
I mean, and I remember telling you, and you're like, you said, fucking A.
Yeah.
You were just like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And it didn't surprise you, which was.
I guess there was something that I kind of saw peripherally that made me go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me.
When you look at like the nonprofit work that I had done, my small real estate portfolio, my rental houses.
Modesty is so becoming on you.
Founding a couple of nonprofits. It was clear to my friends, my close friends, like you, that I had that thing in me.
Funny people, my close friends,
not
and you.
God, take it.
Sorry. Take it. So what were you going to say?
It was clear to all of my good friends, and probably you too. Damn it. I need you in my ear at all times. It was clear to the people who knew and loved me best that I had this interest in, the stock market and finance and strategy and engineering and construction. Always. And
in a way you manifested that. You manifested this career too.
I think I did. I don't think I would have been able to I don't think I would have understood that global design build firm had I not been in real estate, in residential rental real estate. Right. How could I?
It's impossible.
And so it's as if all of these all of these unique things about me, understanding how to tell a story, understanding how to meet people where they are, understanding America, understanding rural America, rural Australia. I know what that looks like. I grew up in that. And so it's like all of these really unique pieces of me converged such that no one else was ever going to be offered that job that I took. I was the perfect person at the perfect time. Well, it was the perfect role for me at the perfect time. Mm-hmm. And how lucky am I that during a global pandemic, when my peers in music, most all that were, as successful or not as successful or more successful, all of us found ourselves at home, unable to...
And scared.
And we had, by the way, bands, crews.
Yeah.
And back to that thing we were talking about before, the responsibility of being a boss in entertainment. No one was paying them, and no one was paying us. And so the corporate world, they had insurance, 401ks, their paychecks kept coming. My wife was at Sony during that time, and she was like, Sony's profits during the pandemic, they're skyrocketing, and I was like, do you think they're going to lay people off? She said, no, actually the business is really doing great. And I was like, Lauren, I want you to look at something. And she was like, what do you, and I'm like, artists are having a very different experience. And she was like, yeah, it's not fair. But there was no fair in COVID.
Exactly.
And so we were where we were, and I pivoted seamlessly to this job that I was loving and learning and curious. And then like right before Christmas that year, I remember, or was it the next year? Anyway, we were off for the holidays and I got a paycheck still. I was like, Lauren, I get paid every 2 weeks.
My favorite was you came into town soon after that, and we hadn't seen each other in a while, and we went to dinner with Daisy.
Yeah.
And you made because I love to treat.
You do.
And especially in my town, you don't get, and I said, come on. I think I even looked at you and I said, are you kidding? You know me. And you went, Ricardo, I've got an expense account. Let me buy you dinner. And I was like, okay.
In all ethical reasoning, I did not expense it, but I think I told you I have an expense account.
Well, we talked. The whole thing was business discussion.
Were we talking about business?
No, but
no, I didn't.
Business.
I didn't. I
remember you saying that to me.
Like,
Ricardo, I've got an expense account.
Yeah. It's a remarkable. Being an artist is a gift, and being the maker of things that we can sit down with a guitar in the morning, and by 5 o'clock there exists a song that didn't exist in the morning.
I say it all the time.
So we're super lucky.
Talk about mystical and magical. Every time.
I'm still amazed by it.
Every time I go, how the did I do that?
Right.
How did we do that?
I was having a conversation with my colleagues yesterday. In fact, we were in a rental car driving to a meeting. We were talking about music, and they said it's just amazing that you can people can open their mouths and that comes out and the songs come out. And they were like, isn't that just amazing? And I said, I agree. 100%. I'm in that camp. I am amazed that we get to do that. And I am amazed with people who operate in corporate spaces.
Yeah.
It's hard. Really, they create the bonds in corporate spaces that we do on the tour bus. It's the same gig.
Yeah.
It's the same, it's remarkably similar to what I always did. Leadership, problem solving, team building, execution, profit and loss. It's the same gig.
But no disrespect to the other people in that community. One thing I really love is a couple years ago, this is a great example. I come into New York, play a gig. You came to the gig. I said, you're getting up with me. And you who has been in this corporate existence and corporate world full time for years, got up with me and we sat there and we sang the song we wrote years ago together called The Edge of Forever, which is one of the greatest songs ever.
Ever.
I'm just going to say it. If you don't know the song, go to YouTube, go to your streaming, look up The Edge of Forever by Richard Marx and Shelley Wright. We wrote it together, we sang it together on my album, and we finally sang it together live.
We'd never done it live. And
people lost their and it was, but when I think back on that, on the heels of the conversation we're having now, how cool that you showed up all smart and right from some office or something you were in the middle of, and you were like, I'm going to get up and be Shelley Wright, the singer now. That's pretty bad.
It is. I'm not going to talk you down. It is so cool. It is so cool. And singing that song that night was such a coalescing of so many. We've performed together a lot on stage. We've done a lot of things, but we'd never sung that song. And do your listeners really want to know why we never did?
Oh, this is your version.
Because we cut it in too high a key, and you nearly killed me getting the vocal out of me.
That I remember.
In the studio.
She kept saying, Dickie, I can't sing this note. And I was like, you can and you will.
It's just, I'm an alto and he sings higher than I do and it's unfair. And
I remember that night. You hated me.
But you got a really great vocal out of me. And I just knew I could never do it live. But then guess what? We did it live. There's something magical about what happens on the stage. We've got a fever, a toothache, or a migraine, which you and I can, we've got migraine stories.
I don't have migraines, but you do.
Well, we have the Dwayne Reed tour.
Yes, but that wasn't my...
it was my migraine.
It's always your migraine.
But when it's my migraine, it's your migraine.
That is true. I'm not suffering it in the same way, but I'm still suffering it.
That's another podcast. We'll do that. But being there's something that happens when you're on stage and the audience, you just rally and you find the notes. And it was such a joy to be on stage with you.
It was so special for me too. We have to do more of that. And it's interesting, we've known each other for so long, and I think that as much as I really hold that song in such high regard, I'm not kidding, that is one of my favorite songs that I've ever been a part of. I just think it's
beautiful.
As good
and the
as
recording is so damn good.
I think we really nailed it. But then, 15, maybe more years later, we sit in this other house a few years ago and write Happy New Year, Old Friend, which is another, like, when we talked about this even before we started rolling. For as much time as we've spent together, we've written not as many songs as we should have.
Yeah.
But man, the ones we've written I'm so proud of.
Like per capita, we crush
Per
it.
capita. Look at you with the business again. Hey, but first of all, I love you and thank you.
But Happy New Year, Old Friend is it may be my favorite song I've ever had a hand in writing.
Oh, really?
And it literally fell out.
It was so easy.
So easy.
So was the other one. Christmas isn't Christmas time.
Yeah.
So you probably know that I give a gift of vinyl at the end of every episode. I really thought long and hard about this one. And I wanted to go with an artist who I love, who I thought maybe you don't know. Because one of my favorite things to do is introduce people, if you don't know, to artists I think are amazing. And this girl, Tovlo.
I do not know her.
Oh, I'm so happy because
I feel like you sent me a link to...
I probably did. I think she's just so special and so amazing. She's had several albums since then, but this is the album that made me a fan. I don't even have it on vinyl. It's just, she's just so
Who is she? Where's she from? Like, what's her story in a nutshell?
She's Swedish. She works with a team, but she changes it up.
Yeah.
She's just, of all the young female singer-songwriters who graced us in the last 10 years, 15 years. It's funny, there's a song, her breakthrough song, which ends this last disc, called Habits. You might, when you hear the song, you might go, oh, I think I know that song. Gotta stay high all the time to keep you off my mind.
Yep, I know that song. Yes. Yeah.
Guess who spotted that before it became a hit? Daisy Fuentes.
Oh, Daisy, head of A&R?
She is the best A&R person.
Yeah.
A&R means that's the how would you, you stood for artists and repertoire at record companies when there were record companies. But it was the people who spotted the right artists to sign and the songs that would be hits.
That no one had ever heard before.
The Clive Davises of the world. Daisy Fuentes is the new Clive Davis. She has spotted so many hits in the last dozen years.
It doesn't surprise me.
This is one of them.
Do you remember when we wrote Happy New Year, Old Friend?
So your gift.
I love this. Tovlo.
Tovlo.
Thank you.
And you're probably thinking, I'm going to take this on the plane with me now?
No, I've got a place in my suitcase.
So I can send it to you. Okay, good.
We called Daisy into the room by the piano and you said, Daisy!
Did I say it like that?
Yeah. You said, you got to get in here. And she got in there and we played it for her. And some expletives were said and we knew we didn't need to change a single word. She's perfect.
She's a good barometer.
Yeah.
And when I play her something, if she doesn't go, if she kind of goes, I like it, I'm devastated.
Yeah.
No, I'm devastated.
Yeah.
I take it very personally.
She's good. She's got many gifts.
She does.
Many gifts.
And let's go experience those gifts at dinner with her now.
At dinner. And I will not expense it.
I'm taking
just my current company, ISS. I want them to know.
I'm buying dinner, ISS. Really? They went with those initials? Really?
I know. I know it.
So close.
It's a 125-year-old company.
So they were like, hey, ISIS, we were here first.
That's exactly it. We're standing our ground.
Yeah, we are. Shelley Wright, I love you so much, and I'm so honored to be your friend, and I love that you were here with me, and you're the best.
I love you deeply, my friend, and I'm not sure what I'd do without you.
Thank
you. And you're going to feel heat on me because I'm having a hot flash.
But you'd figure something out.
I wouldn't. I can't make it without you.
No.
I mean,
I can't make it without you. Okay, we're going to the piano.
Yeah. You were the first person I called when they told me my dad had cancer.
Yeah.
Like, you're my first call.
Yeah.
And you're giving my eulogy.
We did discuss that. That's right.
And Lauren keeps saying, like, that just seems, I'm like, number one.
I can see how your wife would be like, wait, what?
Right, but do you really want to give my eulogy? You don't usually give the eulogy of your spouse.
It's an important choice.
Who else would give my eulogy?
Well, I have no plans to give it, but
I'm going to live to be 100, but I'm just saying it's going to just like thread the needle.
Maybe we'll renegotiate later.
I love you.
I love you too.